And so tell me a little bit about what you expect from that meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, so the meeting tomorrow should be answering some really key questions. One of them being the most important are the benefits of this vaccine. Do they outweigh the risks? Another question that we're going to be getting answers to is are these events at a higher rate than what's happening in the general population? And we saw this is the case with AstraZeneca in the UK, but now we need to answer this question for the J&J vaccine. The meeting tomorrow also should go over very closely these 6 cases and also hear from other experts on the status of these cases.
Sorry, the second question, can you go back to that? Explain that to me.
Yeah, so we have to remember that we're giving these vaccines in real life. So other things are happening on the background. Blood clots happen all the time in the United States that aren't connected to vaccines. So we need to make sure that the rate in which blood clots are happening among these young individuals is higher than the rate in the general population, because if it is higher, it may be a safety signal that something is happening.
Can you explain for people like me, can you explain the science who has no idea? Can you explain the science behind how a vaccine could lead to a blood clot?
We're actually not entirely sure what the biological mechanism is yet. That is something that I know people are currently investigating, but figuring out that link is very important to make these causal statements and is being investigated very closely.
Interesting. So one of the questions was, what was kind of the biggest warning sign for them to pull it? Do you know? And then because when we talk about these 6 cases, we've heard someone refer to it as 1 in a million. And so is that 1 in a million, that's enough for them to say this is not? And I know you talked about benefit versus risk. So talk a little bit about what led to this decision.
So I'm not entirely privy to what happened exactly, but I can make some educated guesses. So in the clinical trial in Johnson & Johnson, we already started seeing the safety signal. 15 blood clotting events happened among the vaccinated, while 10 events happened among the unvaccinated. And so what the authors concluded, the scientists concluded in the FDA J&J document is that we can't rule out that vaccines don't or do cause blood clots. And so this was already on our radar. And so what we needed, though, is because these events are so rare, and they are incredibly rare, we need a lot more people to get the vaccine to see if this is a true safety signal or just something about randomness and error. And so I do know that this was already on the forefront of what we need to be looking for. And so that is likely why it was flagged very early on and very proactively by the CDC.
So when you say there was already 10 cases or 15 cases, this is 6 cases. What makes these cases different than the clinical trial cases?
We don't know yet. And I think that's why we're, taking a breather, we're stopping to fully investigate whether these cases are similar to those ones we saw in the clinical trial, or are they different? And if they're similar, how are they similar? So we can start informing clinical care down the road.
Do you know if these 6 cases are more severe than what they saw in the clinical trials? Do you know that?
I don't know it, but it sounds like they're about the same kind of events.
Okay, so I guess my question is, if they saw it in the clinical trials, why would they at that point they decided that the reward was greater than the risk? Is that why they pushed it out?
And we during the clinical trial, like I said, this thing in epidemiology called power. we just needed more numbers. This is such a rare event that we need more, we need more people to see if this event truly is something we should be worried about. And that it was pushed out. We need to remember that this vaccine was not approved. It was authorized for emergency use, which is different than approval. So we keep tabs very closely on these safety signals.
What do you, why did you want to attend the meeting tomorrow?
Because I think it's a really important conversation. Blood clots are incredibly rare, but we need to be more transparent about this process. And I think that a lot of people are anxious about this now and really need a scientific translation on what's happening and why and what we're seeing in terms that they can understand. Like I said, this meeting tomorrow is open to the public. They always are. We just weren't very excited about them 2 years ago. But not everyone will be able to understand the medical technology or medical terms, as well as the public health terms that are being used in the conversations. And I really think that someone needs to attend, and so we can get what's discussed there reported to the public.
And that's a virtual meeting, I assume, correct?
It's virtual, yeah.
You're not physically going anywhere, correct? You're going to be virtual. Okay.
Yes, it's virtual. It's virtual at 1:30.
Okay, and what will they come to a decision tomorrow? What will happen tomorrow that you think?
That's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. I hope that we can come to the decision. These are serious cases, though, that need to be thoroughly investigated. And so tomorrow we'll get a better understanding of where we are in the investigation and what we are seeing. And if the FDA and the CDC has enough information to make a vote on it, whether we continue to distribute it, whether we distribute it only among certain populations, or we just stop altogether, which I highly doubt will happen.
So those are the three options, basically, to continue going as is, to do it to only give it to a certain population, or to stop it altogether. Those are probably going to be the three options.
Yeah, and there's one more option I would say is that you continue it, but include this as a warning in the vaccine pamphlet. It's currently not included as a warning in the vaccine pamphlet. And if we do see it, people need to know that this is a risk. There's always risks associated with vaccines, with any medication at that. And so, so you have basically four options. One, just continue as is. Two, continue as is, but include a warning in the vaccine pamphlet. Three, only distribute it among certain populations. We're starting to see this in Europe with AstraZeneca, that some populations like younger women aren't being encouraged to take AstraZeneca, or in this case, Johnson & Johnson, but are more encouraged to take Pfizer or Moderna. Or the fourth option is stop altogether, which I don't see happening.
Interesting. And so how soon or how quickly, we don't know how soon or quickly they would be able to come to this conclusion, right?
We don't. I mean, we'll get a general understanding tomorrow about the timeline. I hope, and I know that they won't rush this process. This is an important process to look through thoroughly. I know that in Europe, it did take a week or two to fully investigate and come to rigorous conclusions. So it may take that much time. It may not. Like I said, we'll see.
And I'm sorry, I'm not too familiar with what happened in Europe. That was the AstraZeneca vaccine?
Yeah, so sorry, I keep referencing that. But
okay.
The AstraZeneca vaccine, this similar thing happened. We saw blood clots among women, younger women, that made some Europe countries stop, almost all Europe countries stop distributing AstraZeneca until a full investigation happened. They found that blood clots were associated with AstraZeneca, but still also found that the benefits outweigh the risks and continue to distribute it. It's important that we recognize that Johnson & Johnson is a similar biotechnology like AstraZeneca. So they're the same type of vaccine, just like Pfizer and Moderna are mRNA. These are both adenoviruses.
I guess my question, the one thing that could make them different is they use a virus, correct? And the mRNA does not, correct?
So they use a common cold virus that they deactivate and insert the instructions for COVID and then insert it into your body. This is different than an mRNA vaccine, which just holds the instructions in this little fat bubble. This is also different than, for example, the flu vaccine, which, like Novavax, is a dead live virus, if that makes sense. And so all three of these use slightly different ways or techniques for the body to recognize COVID.
Interesting. So you think that it would be not too hasty, but it wouldn't be, I don't know how I'm going to say this, but it's okay to kind of draw that comparison to AstraZeneca because they are both similar and we are sort of seeing the same problems, possible problems between the two, correct?
Yeah, so we're starting to see this pattern among those two vaccines that we haven't seen for Moderna or Pfizer. One other interesting thing that I think we need to start looking at is not in the United States, but globally is Sputnik 5. It's the Russian vaccine for COVID, is also created from an adenovirus. And I'd be very curious to see if we're seeing the same safety signals. Because as epidemiologists, if we start seeing these patterns, this will let us able to understand the biological mechanisms of why this is happening. And we'll be able to come to some better conclusions on and recommendations on who should get this vaccine.
And with the AstraZeneca conclusion, did they, I know you said they continued doing it. Is there a warning for younger women not to get it?
Some countries do, some don't. Like I said, all the countries kind of chose different pathways of those 4 options. So some are suggesting that younger women don't get the AstraZeneca vaccine, but rather get an mRNA one. And some have just opened it up to everyone with this warning in the leaflet with the vaccine. So like I said, I'll be very curious what the United States chooses in these next couple of days.
What would you tell someone, specifically a younger woman, who maybe just got the Johnson & Johnson?
Yeah, it's a good question. And we are starting to see a lot of anxiety with this. A lot of people have, gotten the vaccine in the past 3 weeks. And I'm glad that you bring it up because just everyone remember that these events are very, very rare. There's 6 events that we are investigating out of 6.8 million doses that we've already distributed in the United States. But given that, if you've had the vaccine in the past 3 weeks, keep an eye on your symptoms if they arise. So if you develop severe headaches, abdominal pain, leg pain, or shortness of breath, and it's been within 3 weeks after your vaccination, be sure to contact your healthcare provider and keep them in the loop in what you're experiencing.
If it's beyond 3 weeks, are we assuming they're in the clear?
If it's beyond 3 weeks, I would just be careful and just call your doctor anyways. But what we're seeing is typically these events happen in the first 3 weeks.
And all 100% younger women?
100% younger women under the age of 55.
Wow, that is interesting. It's interesting that it's so specific. And I know that we don't know the science behind it, but that would be an interesting thing to figure out why that population.
Yeah, and it's brought up a lot of questions. Is this due to birth control, right? Is this due to hormones? Is this due to environmental exposures? There's a lot of questions this brings up. But again, when we start finding these patterns that it could be younger women, it could be younger people, then we can start understanding the why behind it. And those patterns are important for us to investigate.
The why behind it probably wouldn't come for a while, though. That's not what we're going to find out tomorrow, correct?
I don't think so. Yeah.
Okay. Another question was, I mean, we kind of talked about this. What was the biggest warning sign for them to pull it? People are saying, you know, the comparison, because it seems like it's a small number, right? We talked about that. The comparison is people are more susceptible to blood clots from their birth control, right? That could lead to more of a risk than possibly this. So the reason we pull it, though, is, and you've already kind of touched on that, is because it was already on the radar. Is that correct?
It was already on the radar. And I like I said, I think we're going to get a lot more information tomorrow about the specific cases and maybe even why these specific cases are of concern and what preliminary investigations have found.
So would you tell people, I know that there's already vaccine hesitancy, and this is something that doctors have been trying to fight since the beginning. This probably doesn't help. So what would you tell people?
No, this doesn't help. And honestly, I know a lot of my colleagues and I are quite worried about vaccine hesitancy, regardless if it's J&J or another vaccine. We're worried that people that were already on the fence may now just go to the no side of the fence. And, you know, what do you tell people? Well, one, you be transparent as possible. That's why I love the CDC and FDA got onto this really quickly. We're being very proactive about it. Have this open meeting tomorrow that anyone can attend. I think we'll also have to work and hear out people now. Why are they added hesitancy? Open that two-way communication street, and you know, continue to show them the science and continue to show through example of getting vaccines and not getting COVID.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you taking time to speak to us today.